Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win, you find a way to lose. Good morning to everyone out there. Please like and subscribe if you get through the video and enjoyed the content. Now, jumping right into it. Errol Spence, Thurman, and Terence Crawford. Look, let's be real. They're nearing retirement. And I really don't think they care about paying sanctioning fees for an undisputed bout, unification, or for just any title, right? At this point in these guys' careers, when you take a look at where they're at, the direction they're going, how much more do you think they really want to accomplish as far as becoming champion, undisputed champion, champion in another weight division, right? Now, when you think about that, if his mindset has changed already to, I've kind of been there and done that as far as with titles, unified, undisputed, for one of these guys in particular, but we're just talking about all boxers, right? If they've been a champion in multiple weight divisions, and now you know you have maybe 2 or 3 years left on your career, it's all about setting up the proper nest egg. Now, I honestly think Errol Spence, we already know Thurman is kind of checked out, and Terence Crawford are really getting ready for that transition to, regular life. And when you look at how much money these guys have to pay to be an undisputed champion, to be a unified champion, just to have a title, just to compete in a title bout, just for the promoters and managers, the kind of money they have to pay, it's alarming, right? There's been a lot of talk about sanctioning bodies, the fees that these guys pay, these guys charge, and how they make so much money off the efforts of boxers. Now, we know boxing is one of the most lucrative sports in the world, right? And there's a whole lot of reasons. So a lot of people just really can't understand how naturally a lot of the boxing champions make fortunes on their fights. But there's a lot of things that go into how these guys make the kind of money they make, and how they can afford to have, what some people would call like a Mayweather lifestyle or a lavish lifestyle, right? But there's a cost incurred to set up these fights and to get them to where you see them making the millions of dollars, okay? Now, there's a lot of charges that are there and they have to deal with, other than just logistics and, and the preparations, right? Now, there's the costs that they have to pay to these damn sanctioning bodies. Now, people want to know, man, how in the world are fees paid by the boxers to these organizations? Now, there are 4 major organizations, right? Or you hear people referring to them as bodies in the sport of boxing, right? Now, this is what sucks about it. Each of these bodies or organizations, they have their own belt. Now, for each of these bodies, for a fighter to want to go and fight for a title, doesn't matter what kind of title it is, from an interim title to the super title, right? It doesn't matter. They have to pay a sanctioning fee. Now, that means for a unification fight, which Errol Spence and Thurman is not, right? There will be multiple fees paid to the bodies. You understand that? So the fact that Spence has 3 belts, that IBF, WBA, and WBC, there will be fees paid by him and Thurman both in order for them to fight for those 3 belts. So that means they'll be paying fees for each one of those sanctioning bodies, which is crazy. And that's why the organizations, they've been coming even more, especially recently, right? They've been coming under even more severe criticism. Now, this criticism didn't just begin, but it's kind of reared its head again, especially in 2022, when Mauricio Suleiman was talking about how he wanted to have one champion. There should be one champion. You hear Deontay Wilder always talking about one face, one name. But Suleiman went on record and said, look, we need to just have one champion in every weight division. Now, that's what he's saying. He's talking the talk, but he's not walking the walk, because he's the guy coming up here with the franchise champion and all this other shit. Because that's just a real easy way for these guys to make money. And it's not cool. So since we're talking about the WBC, right? According to their guidelines, now this is what's interesting. The first sanctioning fees for any title fight, make sure you understand this, for any title fight comes from the promoter. The promoters have to pay an annual registration fee. So now when we think about promoters, and sometimes you look at the fighters who are getting slots as far as for the main event and TV time. Well, especially if it's for a title, right? These promoters have to pay a lot of money every year. And this is per fighter. And the range could be between $7,000 to $10,000, right? In addition to that, for every fight, they have to pay for every fight. These promoters have to pay between $5,000 and $25,000. Now, this depends on the type of title and the weight category. So when you just think of what promoters have to pay and how much money can be lost if something goes wrong with the fight, I don't care if it's $5,000, $10,000, $30,000, $1 million. No promoter wants to lose money. But in addition to that, these sanctioning bodies, if a fight doesn't go forward, they get paid anyway. Hey man, let me tell you, corruption at its finest, right? Now, for the boxers themselves, they got to pay 3% of all their fight earnings, including pay-per-view earnings, broadcast, and any other mode of earning. Now, this sucks, okay? You want to take some of their fight earnings, okay? Maybe I kind of understand that. Doesn't mean I agree, but I kind of understand that. But damn, they're going to take the pay-per-view earnings too? And then they want to look at the earnings made from the broadcast? And then if these fighters are being sponsored by somebody, or basically any other mode of earnings, right? These sanctioning bodies want to get their hands on that too. Man, that is crazy. And this includes earnings not only by the fighter, but by anyone who receives money on his behalf. So it doesn't matter how smart you think you are. If you have money coming to someone else, but on your behalf, because you're trying to circumvent the system and not pay these sanctioning bodies, and they are able to get a pulse on the situation to figure out what's going on, they're going to come back and get their money, right? But the thing is, for gross earnings up to $100,000, a minimum of $3,000 is to be paid by the champion and $1,000 by the challenger. For vacant belts, they both pay $2,000. Now, the WBO has a lot of crazy fees, but when we're talking about the sanctioning fees, the WBO is maybe a little bit easier to really sort out. The WBA and IBF, all that shit is just, that's just a cluster, man. I was out there reading through that. You can go read on that on your own, but just to keep things simple, we'll kind of keep this conversation kind of geared around the WBC and WBO, since the WBC, that's the title that, Keith Thurman was supposed to be fighting for, but now it's not because of the special permit crap. And the WBO is what Terence Crawford has. But the WBO sanction fees are a little easier to understand for just, most of us common people. Now, according to their rules, there are no promoter fees. While the champion will have to forego 3% of his fight purse with a minimum of $1,000 and a maximum of $200,000. For unification fights, the fee changes. Boxers have to pay 2% of their purses to the organization, while the minimum and maximum limits remain the same. So now they got to pay 2% to the organization, and they still get hit over the head with minimum and maximum limits. So when you think about it, right, as far as the belts and boxing, look, man, the more belts, it just leads to more money for these sanctioning bodies to make, and more money for these boxers and promoters to have to pay. That's why, you may not like Fast Eddie, but Fast Eddie, very, very vocal about the sanctioning bodies and trying to keep them happy and the amount of fees they have to pay to the sanctioning bodies. And, you know, you could sense his frustration when he talks about that. And when we talk about frustration, and let's just look at Anthony Joshua and how he reacted at the end of that second fight with Usyk. What you saw in Anthony Joshua, maybe the first time, and maybe he probably belongs in the Guinness Book of World Record for imploding and exploding at the same time. Never seen nobody do that. I mean, it's like he was a magician, man, you know, performing tricks in the ring. But that's because of the, okay, look at the amount of money that Anthony Joshua has paid over the last several years. Every year, just for being a champion. And for every fight and all those belts, right? The amount of money he and Eddie Hearn had to pay. You're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars. Talking about upwards of like 10 million if I remember what Eddie Hearn was saying. Upwards of like $10 million, man. Just for him to hold those belts, for Eddie Hearn to make sure he stays registered with the sanctioning bodies, and just for him to go out there and have fights. He gets hit over the head. These champions get hit over the head in different areas. And at the end of the day, like I've said before, and I'm going to keep underscoring it, the sanctioning bodies are getting paid off the efforts of fighters. Now, when you think about what's going on, right? You talk about promoters criticizing the sanctioning bodies criticizing the sanctioning bodies, right? Because Suleiman will come out and say that, hey, this is wrong, we need to improve it. But he's been saying this. There's an article I read. I did a video on it a couple weeks ago. Going back to, I don't even think it was 2010 yet, man. It may have been like, the article may have been like 2012 or something like that, where Suleiman was talking about how they need to have it may have been after 2012, whenever like the Super Six and all that crap was taking place. He was talking about how there needs to be more of that, but they need to have a Super Six style tournament to establish an undisputed champion. And he said he was working feverishly with the other sanctioning bodies because the fees that fighters have to pay and promoters have to pay are too much money and it's not right, and they need to clean up the sport of boxing, right? Fed everybody a really, really nice crap sandwich. And people, they ate it and had a tough time digesting it because they still haven't been able to pass it through the system. And we're in 2023 and about 10 years has passed. So what I'm saying is this. The fact that these sanctioning bodies continue to come out with innovative ways to get money off the efforts of fighters, it's not going anywhere. But that's why you see, in particular, one fighter himself, this is before he even retired, with Floyd Mayweather. You guys remember Floyd Mayweather, man? He had a lot to say about those belts. And this is why Gervonta Davis gets criticized, right? I honestly think what's going on here with Spence, Crawford, and even Thurman, I think Mayweather had a little bit to do with that. The fact that Mayweather said, look, you can't eat titles. You can't feed your kids titles. Titles don't matter. You're basically buying belts, right? That's what Floyd Mayweather said. Why in the world do I have to go and fight somebody and I have to pay you just to get a title? So basically, I'm paying you, I'm buying my belt. If I don't pay you, I don't get the belt. He's like, we're just going shopping. The highest bidder gets the belt. And I don't think a lot of people understood what Mayweather was saying. But Mayweather talked about all the belts he won. Now, when you talk about Mayweather, man, look at all the weight divisions he was in and how many titles he unified. And look at how many times he was the lineal champion and all these different, status that he was able to earn because he did it. But you look at towards the end, he didn't want that crap. He didn't want to pay any money to those sanctioning bodies. He wanted all his money for himself. He didn't care. And when you look at Crawford, Spence, and Thurman, and even Gervonta Davis, although this isn't about him, you'd have to think these guys are getting at the end of their career. Although the belts matter, the belts are leverage, how much more money do you think these guys really want to shell out to these sanctioning bodies? Okay? Now, if they're getting paid huge money, then, it's kind of worth it. But at the same time, when you've been doing it for such a long period of time, and when you sit back, you timeline it and see, damn, it's been over, $5 million, $6 million, $2 million that I've been paying to these sanctioning bodies. For what? It can make it when you start forcing things and you find yourself in a position where you're postured to do something that deep down in your gut you don't want to do, you don't do it. And if these are the kind of decisions that are being made by the champions in boxing and we want to see them come together and fight, that's where we as the fans, again, we're that fly on the wall can't talk. And also, we can't get inside the minds of these fighters. We can try to, speculate, assume, make an educated guess, right? But we don't know. But that's where you can see where some of these decisions that are happening, when you take what a fighter does or doesn't want to do, a promoter, manager does or doesn't want to do, a sanctioning body does or doesn't want to do, and you try to bring that together, you got a shit sandwich. Now, to me, what makes this whole thing stink more than ever is like when Floyd Mayweather talked about this whole super champion crap and the franchise champion, right? Now, people, Mauricio Suleiman comes up with some pretty nice title belts, doesn't he? They look good, don't they? Y'all know there's a fee associated with those little cute belts that he comes up with, don't you? They don't just make that because the WBC sees the boxers as his friends. The organization sees promoters, managers, and boxers as their friends. That's not the case at all. They came up with all this super champion, franchise champion, and all these mestizo belts and all these crazy belts, the Queen Elizabeth belt. All that was solely monetary, man. Okay? So the more money, the more belts, the more money for these sanctioning bodies. And, the damn 3% here and a couple 100,000 here. I mean, those rates, for the most part, stay the same. Okay? So when we talk about Mayweather, he's been very vocal about it, right? Y'all remember back in 2015, man, he was stripped of his WBO belt because he refused to pay $200,000 in sanctioning fees. Now, that was the maximum limit of the 3% because of the amount of money that Mayweather was making during his fights. Now, you think about that, right? Let's just look at that. Maximum limit of 3%. If Mayweather let's say Mayweather, during his time, he was an undisputed champion with 4 belts. And every time he fought, because, Mayweather was he was tearing people out the frame, right? This man had to pay $200,000 per belt. 4 belts, right? If he had to pay $200,000 per belt, that means $800,000 every fight he had to pay. That does not include the money that the damn promoters have to pay for the damn registration fee, for the fight, all those other fees, man. And then for Mayweather, any money he's making, right? In addition to his fight purse. And he always talking about when he wears the patches on his trunk, there's $1 million for this, someone give me $1 million for that. He has to give a piece of that to the sanctioning body. And we already talked about broadcast rights, pay-per-view rights, the live gate, any form of revenue. Now you tell me, if you're Terence Crawford, if you're Errol Spence, right? Even Keith Thurman, and you're about to go into a fight, and you're already tired of paying sanctioning fees, it's gonna take huge money for you to, one, kill yourself for a weight that you don't want to be at anyway. 2, to really want to pay these sanctioning bodies big money when they really don't care about you. Right? Now, let's talk about Gervonta Davis again, since I brought his name up a moment ago. this is why I think Gervonta Davis, I think this contributed to the split between Gervonta Davis and Floyd Mayweather, and also Leonard Ellerbe, because, you know, they were all a unit, right? But when you think about it, you know, Gervonta Davis is getting a lot of flack about the fighters that he was challenging. People called him tomato cans, cherry picks, whatever. Now, I will say this. Leonard Ellerbe and Floyd Mayweather have gone on record and said titles don't matter. Even Tank said that he don't really care about the titles. But Ellerbe and Floyd, this is what they were doing. And I agree with them. Of course, I want to see Tank fight stiffer competition, but I'm going to be honest with you. If it was me, shit, I'm a smart guy. I'd listen to them. They didn't want to put him in super hard fights. They weren't worried about putting him in fights to get all those belts. Boxing fans are just sitting back on the outside looking and saying, oh, Tank's resume is weak. Tank sucks. Tank can't beat the elite. Tank's scared. He's a coward. He's in the Mayweather protection program. No, he's not. Mayweather, Ellerbe, it's like you can call them they have Merrill Lynch. You guys know who Merrill Lynch is? It's like you got Mayweather Lynch out here. Mayweather and Ellerbe were making sure that Tank Davis' bank account was growing handsomely, fight after fight after fight. And that was their goal, to navigate Tank Davis, navigate his career in a kind of way to where he takes little risk or moderate risk, little to no damage, and gets a huge return on the back end. But this is the problem. Although Tank was making really good money with those guys, he's without them now. He can continue to make good money. Tank wants legacy. So, although these sanctioning bodies, which Floyd was trying to avoid with Gervonta Davis, although these sanctioning bodies are there, and they're going to suck the eyeballs out of Tank Davis if he goes and fights Devin Haney, which they're already sucking the eyeballs out of Devin Haney. You can only imagine the kind of money Devin Haney's had to pay to him, right? When Tank Davis goes out here, and because he's going to pick up those titles. If he gets a shot at Devin Haney, to me, Tank Davis just obliterates him. Tank Davis is going to get his legacy. He's going to get all the belts. But I think that's when he'll realize, all right, I see what the hell these guys were telling me. Because see, one thing you can't do, you can't teach experience. You can try to convey things to somebody. You can talk to you blue in the face. But if they don't want to listen, they don't want to listen. But I think the one thing that Mayweather, maybe he failed to realize, and this is just me thinking out loud, maybe he failed to realize that you're telling a young man like Tank Davis, who may be the best pound-for-pound fighter in boxing, right? You're trying to make him feel, you're trying to get him to understand or convince him that he doesn't need to fight for legacy. Now, and this guy is looking at you, telling him, don't worry about legacy, don't worry about those titles, just get your money. But he's looking at you and he's saying, shit, you have your money, you had titles, and you have legacy. All your money came from your legacy and all those titles and the fact that you beat all those top fighters. The amount of champions you beat. But you're telling me not to do that? See, I don't think that clicked in Davis' head, and I don't think Floyd really understood just how important that was to Tank Davis. But I understand what Floyd was saying and doing. He's like, look, you don't need to come out here and put yourself through what I put myself through. You know what I'm saying? I figured this out. I know this game. I know this system. These sanctioning bodies aren't our friends. Yeah, those belts are like certifications in the corporate world. They matter, right? They get the attention. However, I figured out a way to where you can still get the job done, make even more money than those guys with those belts or those guys with those certifications. You just have to listen to me. And to me, that's where the breakdown happened. Tank wanted to go out there and fight legacy, which means he wants to get titles and he wants to pay fees. He's going to end up having to pay all these crazy ass fees. And then Mayweather didn't want to pay all those fees. Remember, the promoter has to pay all that crap. Mayweather, remember, you guys got to understand, Mayweather didn't want to pay that stuff. So if he doesn't want to pay it, that's going to create problems with his fighter who wants to go into a title fight. Okay? So, again, it's a lot of money. And Anthony Joshua, we know he's been paying, look, ever since he became world champion, man, I think Anthony Joshua has been paying, several $1 million a year. But, he doesn't have the titles anymore. But I think Anthony Joshua may have paid damn near $10 million in sanctioning fees. And that's horrible. When you just look at what the going rates were. And don't be surprised, with inflation and everything else, if they bubble up those sanctioning fees, those costs, right? It's the cost to be the boss, cost to be the champion. So as a result, man, you really can't blame the fighters for not wanting to really go out here if they don't have to and defend their belts. Can't blame them because the amount of money they have to pay. But at the same time, can't blame the fans for thinking that these guys are all ducks, all afraid to fight. Because I don't think the fans really understand what these fighters have to deal with when it comes to the kind of money they have to pay and just how these sanctioning bodies selfishly benefit from the fighters and their managers. But things would be a lot easier, if there was just, one belt. It really would. If there was just one belt, it'd be a lot easier, man. Per weight class. It's just too many damn belts. So it's just one of those things, man. It's like when I was in the military, it's one of those conversations we used to always have. How do you balance morale with the mission? You know what I'm saying? If you push for morale and trying to keep everybody happy, something gets missed and you have mission degradation. But if you push 100% for the mission, sometimes people have to work long hours, may have to miss lunch, etc., and then morale deteriorates. So how do you find the sweet spot? And for me, when it comes to finding the sweet spot of making sure sanctioning bodies are getting what they want, but then at the same time, the promoters and the fighters feel like they're getting a fair deal. And in addition to that, the fight fans are pleased with seeing the bouts they want to see. And then they can understand, what's going on with titles being on the line or not being on the line. That's not an easy solution to that. Okay? It's just a lot of money being made, man. And again, I just don't think it's that simple. Mayweather went on and he was talking, remember, when it comes to the sport of boxing, he says, when it talks about those belts, and this is pretty much where we're at with belts when it comes to Spence, Crawford, Thurman, 147, going up to 154, because you got Jamel there with all those belts at 154. A lot of people are just tired, man. And it's just a lot of money being wasted, man. Too many titles, too many belts in one division. Sanctioning fees, interim belts, you know what I'm saying? Super champion, sanctioning fees. Everything has a damn sanctioning fee, man. So it's frustrating. And it really is like what Floyd Mayweather said and other fighters have said. It's like getting an amateur trophy, man. You come out here, you have a couple fights, string together a couple wins. Here, we reward you with a trophy. And, these fighters are so happy to get the trophy, but don't realize that it's all a mind game. It's just business. It's all BS. Sanctioning body's going to put a little BS in your hand, but then they take all this money out your purse, okay? So we'll give you this trophy that cost us maybe $10 to $50 to make, but we're going to take a large percentage of your of any revenue that you were able to generate as a result of going into this fight. So it's just not good for the sport of boxing, and we'll see what happens in the future. But for Crawford, for Spence, for Thurman, and everything going on with these guys, and even if we look beyond that, even for Spence, if he comes back and he decides to stay at 147, if he can't make a fight with Crawford and he keeps defending those belts, this man has to pay sanctioning fees and all the other kind of fees for those 3 belts every single time he fights. His promoter, they have to pay all kind of fees every single time he fights. You know, they're getting hit over the head threefold every single time. And I honestly feel this isn't the main reason why what we're seeing happening with Spence and Thurman and, you know, what's coming up for Crawford. But I think this is another one of those contributing factors. You know, just the fees, you know, and just trying to kind of come to a somewhat of an agreement between the promoters, the managers, the fighters, the sanctioning bodies. I honestly believe this kind of plays into it as well. But again, still more work to be done to try to understand how we arrived at a special permit for Spence to come and fight Thurman with no titles on the line. But when you really look at it, how they get hit over the head with all these crazy fees, which to me is a bit unfair, but they're basically buying their belts, right? And you think about the fact that these guys are pretty much close to retirement. Who would want to keep paying hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars to sanctioning bodies when really they don't have to if they just drop those belts? Or they can find a way to go into a fight with somebody, settle the differences without paying those sanctioning fees. Now, that being said, y'all keep cool, but let's just take this that we applied to pretty much the welterweight division, apply that to super welterweight. Let's apply that to 160. Let's apply that to 168. Let's look at what's going on at 175. Okay, that's why these sanctioning bodies, when they see that these belts aren't being defended, millions of dollars lost. That's why you see what they're doing right now at 147. They're forcing fights. They're forcing interim fights. They're forcing title eliminators. They're not playing. They lost a lot of money. So hopefully you got to the end of this video. This boils down to money. And if these boxers, they're not going to be proactive and defend their titles every 3 to 4 months, every 6 months, these sanctioning bodies are going to put measures in place to make sure that those titles get defended or people get stripped. That being said, y'all keep cool. Please consider donating to the channel. Shout out to the veterans, all 7 continents, and I'm in the breeze.